What's up guys, it's Kyra and welcome back to my channel. So to continue on my beauty basics series, I had thought that since I've already done foundation, I tackled, how to find your undertone, how to determine your skin type, how to test foundation, how to shade match to your neck, how to apply it, my favorite brushes, all that good stuff. I feel like since I've tackled foundation, I feel like naturally my next step would be primer. And the reason why is because you guys don't know how often I am talking to, different women and they're complaining to me about how their makeup won't last throughout the day. Like either they get super oily, it'll start to, rub off, like it won't look the same throughout the day, and just people complaining about how the makeup just won't last. And I'll ask them, okay, well, what primer do you use? And they say, primer? I don't use a primer. And I'm like, that's the reason why your makeup is not lasting throughout the day. So I want to just go ahead and do a video kind of talking about the purpose of a primer and the different types of primers. It shouldn't be too long because primer is honestly a pretty straightforward step. It really serves one purpose, and there are a few different types to reach for, depending on your skin type, but for the most part it's pretty straightforward. So I actually went ahead and looked up the true definition of what a primer is. The term primer is a substance used as a preparatory coat on a previously unpainted wood, metal, or canvas, especially to prevent the absorption of subsequent layers of paint or the development of rust. So as you can see, the term primer originated with paint. But if you think about it, makeup is basically just like painting, right? So again, that primer is that base or that layer or barrier in between the foundation and your skin to allow the foundation to go on a lot smoother, a lot more evenly, and it also gives the foundation something to lock onto throughout the day so it'll stay put and it won't budge, okay? So that's what a primer is, and that's why it's so important to actually use a primer before your foundation. I don't care what your skin type is, a primer is absolutely 100% necessary. Now, depending on your skin type, that will determine the type of primer that you want to use. So, before I jump into primer, I want to just reiterate something I mention all the time, but I want to reiterate it again in this video, and that is the importance of moisturizer. I don't care if you're oily, I don't care if you're normal, I don't care if you're dry, I don't care for combination. Whatever your skin type, you have to moisturize your skin first. Now, of course, your moisturizer depends on your skin type. I won't go into that tangent because that's definitely more of a skincare topic. But I mean, we should all know, or we should all have a go-to moisturizer that works with our skin. I am combination, so I don't use a moisturizer that's too oily, that's too greasy. I want something that absorbs into my skin and like truly quenches my skin, makes it feel like a baby's bottom, but that doesn't leave me greasy. My go-to recently has been the TILBURY Magic Cream. I absolutely love this one. Another really good drugstore one that I will recommend is the Neutrogena Hydro Boost Moisturizer. It's made with water and hyaluronic acid, so it literally just makes your skin feel so soft and supple. So I prefer moisturizers that really quench my skin and just really give it a huge surge of moisture without leaving it oily. A lot of women believe that because they're oily that they don't need to moisturize before applying foundation, and that is further from the truth. If you're becoming really oily, a lot of times it's because your skin is trying to overcompensate for the lack of moisture. So if you don't moisturize first, you're going to get even more oily because your skin has zero moisture. So you have to moisturize your skin first, get it nice and hydrated before you move on to foundation. And you see how just instantly my skin has a whole new look and feel to it? Moisturizer, y'all, is just, it's such a necessity. Okay, so we have all moisturized. Now reiterate all because everyone should be moisturizing. And then a second optional step, and this is not a requirement. I honestly don't do it all the time, but I really do this step if I had like very little sleep the night before, if I just really have just circles under my eyes, then I will use a good eye cream. So I'm going to take the TILBURY Magic Eye Rescue, and I do use this one again on days where I've had little sleep and my eyes are, you can just see it in my eyes basically. Eye creams are really good for helping to kind of just smooth out and replump out that area under the eye. and it just helps to moisturize and even out that skin tone, just make you look more awake. So that's why I love using a good eye cream for those days. So we moisturized, we applied some eye cream. Now it's time for primer. So we all know what primer is, but there's different types of primers, and primers come in different formulas these days. I have seen oil primers. I have seen primer sprays. I stick to this traditional, more gel consistency or more silicone consistency primers just because that's what I'm comfortable with. I have used like a primer spray or primer water before in the past. To me, it doesn't work as well, so I prefer to stick to, what I know, because to me, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Generally, you will find different types of primers because different types of primers address different areas. So there are a lot of brands who just have primers or just use the term primer without really acknowledging what it addresses. It's more so just a general primer that kind of addresses the point of a primer, which is, again, to create that nice base and canvas for the foundation. Then you have your moisturizing or hydrating primer. And those primers are really, really more so for people who have drier skin. I wish I had one to show you guys, but I could tell you guys, for example, I had one that I had received from Laura Mercier. They have a really good hydrating primer that I know tons of people love. And that, of course, again, is for people who have really dry skin. So it's literally to hydrate the skin, okay? Of course, it's still a primer. So whenever I go through all these primers, they're still primers. They still serve the purpose of being a nice base or canvas for the foundation. But because of the formula or consistency, it may also tackle something else like hydrating. So that primer, again, is more so for drier skin types, which I don't have, so I don't have one to show you guys, but it's a good one to consider if you do have dry skin. Then you have more of your smoothing primers. And smoothing primers are really, really, really good to combat uneven texture, okay? Okay, so there are people who have perfectly smooth skin, and they don't really need a smoothing primer. But I'm not one of those people, okay? I have texture. I have random breakouts. Just naturally, I just have, large pores and just uneven texture. So I love to use a smoothing primer, okay? I personally don't apply a smoothing primer all over. That's me. I know people who do. For me, I focus it right in the areas that are uneven or that I have large pores, because the key for that primer is to smooth things out. So if you have random wrinkles, or like if you have, laugh lines or large pores or, breakout, I would just recommend applying the primer where needed, okay? And similar to with the foundation that I mentioned in the last video, I have learned that less is more with primer, so I focus it where I need it. Okay, so for example, you guys know I always use the Tarte Clean Slate Timeless Smoothing Primer. And this one here is a bit thicker, which I love. I love thicker primers. And as you can see, it's a bit thicker. But whenever you roll it around, it's like a really thick silicone-y cream almost. It's like very, very thick, which is great because it's really good for smoothing those things out, like your pores or laugh lines and things like that. So that's a smoothing primer. Again, a smoothing primer is literally to smooth out skin texture. So then, of course, we also have a mattifying primer. Now, y'all know me, as I mentioned in my last video, I am combination skin, okay? So I do get oily in my T-zone, which is why in my videos, you guys only see me apply primer in my T-zone. If I'm not oily in that area, I don't apply it. Because again, it's excessive. There's no point in there's no point in me applying a mattifying primer on my temples, because there's nothing happens there, right? So I only apply it where I get oily. So my favorite one is the BECCA Ever Matte Poreless Priming Perfector. Now, I have mentioned before that in my opinion, I find primer is just one of those things, unless you have perfectly smooth skin and normal skin, I think primer is something that you really need to invest in. Invest in a good primer. If you're oily or combination, invest in a good quality mattifying primer. And by good quality, I mean something that dries down to like a matte finish, and you can actually see the primer there on the skin. That's what I prefer. I hate when I apply mattifying primers and it doesn't dry matte. It doesn't dry down at all. and you can't even see like that barrier of that primer on your skin. I want to see it and know it's there. So for example, I'm going to apply the BECCA, which is a clear, kind of creamy consistency. And I apply it here on my nose, my cheeks, and my forehead. Okay? And I just kind of smooth it in. And I do a mixture of patting and swiping motions. I swipe it, of course, on to cover the area, and then I go ahead and actually press it in and pat it in. My cheeks, same thing down here. So kind of swipe it all over and then press it in. And then same thing over here. Now, just looking at my nose, you can see already that as it's drying down to like this really thin, clear film that you can see on my skin. And that's how I know it's a good primer. Like, it sounds weird, but if I can see that film and I can feel it dry down and it dries down matte, that's when I know it's a good quality primer. So I love this one. I also have heard that the Makeup Forever mattifying primer is like basically the same thing. But again, find a good mattifying primer if you are oily. So I'm oily and I have texture and large pores. Okay, so I could easily just use one primer, which this will honestly do the trick. I could get away with just this one, but I personally feel like most mattifying primers, like, to me, my opinion, if it says a mattifying primer, then it's really good at being matte. Now, this one here is an Ever Matte Poreless Priming Perfector. And in my opinion, it's not really that great for minimizing pores. It's just really, really, really good for mattifying. Same thing with the Tarte Clean Slate Primer. This one here is just really, really, really good for smoothing, but I wouldn't use it for mattifying. So because I do have oily skin and I have texture and large pores, I use a smoothing primer and a mattifying primer. I personally think that you should, adjust your primers to your skin concerns. So if you're oily, get a mattifying primer. If you also have large pores, then use a good smoothing primer. If you are dry and you have texture, I would use a moisturizing primer and a smoothing primer. You see what I'm saying? I think that you should just address your skin concerns with different primers if needed. I already used the BECCA Ever Matte Primer. Then I'm going to go ahead and take a little bit of the Tarte Clean Slate. And again, you guys, I'm just applying it where I am, had that texture, those large pores. And I apply it in those areas, which is really only right here in my lower cheek area. That's where I really have large pores, is down there. Like right in there. And again, smooth it out to distribute it, but then press it in. Smoothing primers apply best when they're pressed in. And the reason why is because whenever you're pressing a smoothing primer in, especially something as thick as the Tarte Clean Slate Primer, that's what helps to get the primer to feel in those pores. You really want the primer to basically feel in the pores and to create like a nice smooth barrier on top of those pores, which is why pressing it in really, 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 really helps. Because think about it, if you have like a hole, right, and you apply foundation or any liquid for that matter on top of it, it'll naturally seep into that hole. So when you look at it, it'll be smooth, it'll go down and be smooth again, and it'll go down some more, and of course the going down is the holes. But if you have something in there to fill in those holes, then whenever you apply the foundation on top of it, the foundation doesn't have anything to seep into, okay? So that's why, again, a good smoothing primer is so important. And literally instantly you can see the primer filling in those pores and creating that nice barrier. Okay, so we've done general primers, we've done mattifying primers, we've done smoothing primers. Another one that I have found to be more common these days is like a radiant primer. And this is also not a necessity. It's more so for the type of look you're wanting to do. If you're wanting a more radiant finish, and by radiant, I mean more of a glowy, glow from within kind of look, then a good radiant primer is great for that. So for example, okay, here's my hand with nothing on it, right? if I apply a radiant primer, which radiant primers just have that really soft golden or even silvery sheen to it, then whenever I go and blend it in, it gives my skin that glowy golden or silvery sheen. See? No primer, primer. And this one here is by Laura Mercier. I really only pull this one out like during the summertime, like this time of year, because that's when I really want to be really nice and glowy. But again, this one's really, really good for if you want that dewy finish, okay? And if I did want to do this primer and I wanted to go for that look, I would apply it in the areas that I really want to glow. Again, you guys, the key here is to apply it to specific areas. So you guys know whenever I typically highlight with the powder highlight, I do my forehead, my nose, and the high points of my cheeks. So same thing with the radiant primer. I'm going to take it, I'm going to apply it here, my forehead, some glow, a little bit on my nose, a little bit here on my cupid's bow, because I do here as well, and then again on my cheeks, at the highest points of my cheeks. And you see how it's giving our skin a nice natural glow? And again, what happens is once we apply the foundation on top of it, if you use the right foundation, you should be able to see a little bit of that primer, that radiance primer, peeping through that foundation to give your skin a really nice, healthy glow. And that's what this would be used for. Those are the main primers that I want to talk to you guys about because those tend to be the most common ones. Again, you have your general complexion primers, which is great for people who are normal and like don't really have any serious skin concerns. Your mattifying primer if you're more oily. And then you have your hydrating primer, which of course is great for people who, you know, have really dry skin and who need that extra hydration and moisture throughout the day. Your smoothing primer if you have texture or large pores. Your radiance primer if you want to really glow. I also have here the Fenty Beauty Pro Filter primer, which to me falls into the smoothing primer category. But like, here's a good example of something that, you know, doesn't have the word smoothing in it. But if you really know your primer types, you guys know that this falls into the smoothing category. Just because the idea of it is to give you that filtered finish, which of course is for smoothing out. So that's what this is good for. So it's really good to know what your skin concerns are, you know, like what do you wish that you could fix with your makeup? Like, is it your texture? Is it your oiliness? Is it, you know, your dryness? You know, like what are your concerns? And of course, cater your primers to those concerns. Again, I recommend you just invest in a good primer. You know, drugstore primers, I personally never had the best of luck with drugstore primers. Just my opinion, but I also do have oily and textured skin, so I'm sure if you're normal, you can get away with it. I just say go ahead and just go ahead and invest, get a good one, and you'll be good to go. So you guys, that is it for my recap and, you know, breakdown of primers and what each one is used for, or what it is used for in general, and then what each type of primer is used for. And let me know down below, was this helpful to you guys? Did you like it? You know, did you enjoy it? And if you guys did, then what do you want to see next? So I'll go ahead and stop rambling, and I will catch you guys in my next video. Bye, guys.